On this week's episode, we have part two of our three-part series on Cleveland's 4 James Beard 2025 nominees. Today we're talking with Jeremy Umansky, who with his wife Allie own Larder, a top-rated U.S. delicatessen in Cleveland, Ohio. Jeremy is being nominated for the 5th time and Allie for the first time. I recently met with Jeremy to discuss this year's nomination. His energy was infectious as always. In this podcast, originally recorded 1 year ago, Jeremy talks about wanting people to take a look at what they can do within their means to always go for the freshest ingredient they can get. Jeremy and Allie focus on using Koji, which you can learn more about in his best-selling book, to make food taste like the best version of itself. Used for thousands of years and originally to make alcohol, think about sake, or currently soy sauce. Koji, on a soybean with salt, makes miso. And when you put miso in a bowl of rice with some pickled vegetables, you have a complete set of proteins. You also have a complete set of starches, and you have negligible amounts of fat. A healthy, complete meal. Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Coonahan, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife has been on this journey for over 10 years, and we continue literally to work on it every single day. As a reminder, please subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast. Subscriptions are the lifeblood for any podcast. Our sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen. Think of Cleveland Kitchen as providing easy gut health with their fermented foods, which means better brain health with just 2 forkfuls a day. On this episode, we're grateful to have Jeremy Umansky. Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
He owns Larder along with his wife, Allie, which is using family recipes to become one of the best delicatessens in America. I saw something online, you said the world, so that's quite a...
I mean, those are somebody else's words. We just promote them.
They're located in a firehouse built in the 1800s in Cleveland's Ohio City, also called Hingetown. Since opening up in 2018, they've been nominated 4 times, including this year for James Beard Award. I've known Jeremy since 2015 when he worked in Trentina. My daughter and I took one of his fermenting classes, which we'll talk about more in a minute. My wife and I eat regularly at his delicatessen and bakery, Larder. So thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. And, thanks for being a customer, I guess a friend at this point. I mean, I'm thinking 2015, that's almost a 10-year relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Pretty cool. So I know we're going to talk about kind of how you do things at Larder, but Kim and I started eating there just because we know you source from good ingredient places and your food tastes amazing. I mean, that's kind of why we keep coming back.
Well, thank you.
I know you've got a whole science behind what you do there, but it's good food. So always on this podcast, I start out with asking what you had for breakfast today.
I had a clementine.
Okay.
And that is all I've had today.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been on the run. I had a clementine, and then I did have some unsweetened yerba mate this morning.
Which is?
It is it's like tea. It's a tisane, so it's not a tea leaf. Mm-hmm. It's a South American plant. It's high caffeine. Mm-hmm. It's got all these great phytonutrients in it, and I'm horribly addicted to it.
So I had my grandson yesterday. We went kind of around. He just wanted to run around, so we went over to the lake in front of the Museum of Art.
Yeah.
And he's running. It's like time to go because I had to take him to his dad's, and he stops. And he picks up something out of the ground that my daughter had taught him. He's like, I'm going to go home and make tea for my mom with this. It's like, to me, it looked like a weed, but he knows what it is to make tea, which I thought was like, he's 6 years old. Anyways, we diverse. If I looked in your pantry at Larder, I'm pretty sure I know what I would find. Haven't been in there many times. But if I were to go to your house and look in your pantry, what would we find?
It's so similar to Larder. I have to tell you, Allie was so excited when we opened the restaurant because all of our jars, my house was like that. It no longer is because Larder houses everything. But Allie was very excited for things to move and migrate someplace else. So, my wife and I, it can be 6 months before we cook the same meal again.
Wow.
We don't necessarily have taco night or, you know, pork chop night or just whatever any family has. We just cook what we want. Now, that is to say, I'd say once a week our girls do eat pastrami. It's easy just to bring some home for them and, you know, saute up some vegetables or whatever and ready to go. So, but because of this, we have a lot of spices, we have sauces and, you know, all stuff from all over the world. We've got, I have, you know, a closet full of dried fungi and seaweeds, and we have
what every homeowner should have.
Yeah, exactly. we have dried noodles from every culture, nuts and legumes. At any given time, we probably have 10 different types of whole grains in our house, 5 to 6 different types of dried beans, plus usually 1 or 2 canned beans just for quick, easy stuff, you know. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. I mean, we'll have everything from truffle powder and saffron in the spice cabinet. You know, we get great spices locally at Dune Spices at Van Aken.
Yeah.
Ramat Wiley's the proprietor, and it's just exquisite. So, like, we get a lot of stuff direct from her. You know, garlic powder and that sort of thing. So we've got the whole gamut from literally like Ramat's artisan California garlic powder, you know, all the way through saffron and that sort of thing. Plus, we keep a lot of the things we use and make at Larder, like the amino paste, like the misos and the different fermented things. I have little stashes of those at my house all the time that we just use in things all the time.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not a very big pantry, because we don't cook a lot of the same thing all the time. You know, a little bit of something goes a long way for us because of how infrequently we use it compared to the restaurant. You know, it's the reverse.
So food is integral to our health and longevity, which we all agree on, and ingredients matter. So I kind of want to hear your perspective. I mean, you've got a background in the slow food movement, sustainable food systems, did land management on a farm, preservation, you had restaurants in New York City and Cleveland. It's kind of a lot. So given that background, kind of what is your food philosophy, I guess?
I think it's come down to, in recent years, closed loop systems. If I could put a phrase or a definition on it, it would be closed loop systems.
Okay. So is that like sustainable food, or what is it?
A closed loop system is something that's self-regulating, self-feeding, and self-continuing without any waste coming out of it. Okay? So think of our body could be like a good metaphor for this. We do produce a waste, but as it's going through us, there's other microbes that are benefiting from that waste. And then prior to, let's say, the 20th century, when we had maybe different ways of managing our waste, it was still beneficial, right? And some of those things are reemerging now with 21st century technology. So you can kind of think of us existing in an ecosystem as a closed loop system, except we generate waste. We generate plastic wrappers now. We generate apple cores. We generate fingernail clippings. You know. So if we expand from a person and let's say we take a mashed potato recipe and automatically eliminate the step of peeling the potato and getting rid of that peel, we have now created more of a closed loop system where we're not generating a piece of waste. We're keeping that in the recipe, keeping its nutrients in, saving ourselves some time by not having to actually peel it, some time, some cramping in the hand, however many potatoes you're going to get. You know, we're creating more of a closed loop system. Now, everything else in the recipe would have to be reflective of that, both in how we use it and, ideally, in a perfect world, how we source it. That isn't cold cut. It isn't a reality for everybody. Not everybody can afford or even wants to afford in ingredients of a specific quality. some people it's not a concern.
Understood, but I think we'll talk about the recipe at the end of the episode, but I mean, I think there is a way for people to eat affordably and healthy.
Agreed.
I mean, it is.
Agreed.
It is possible. Everybody
Agreed.
doesn't have to shop at Whole Foods, though.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Listen, we have scales of food, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if all you can afford is like select grade beef,
Mm-hmm.
or buying meat at a Dollar General or something like,
Yeah.
still that fresh piece of meat is better than getting some sort of further processed industrialized food, i.e. fast food.
Right.
Right? Within that, we look at the cut of meat from the freezer case at Dollar General, which they do sell cuts of meat and fish in there. And we look at maybe some offerings that Heinen's has. Or maybe we go mid-tier in between and we say Mark's.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mark's is definitely a few steps above Dollar General.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And then Giant Eagle, Heinen's. You're going to find different qualities of that same cut of meat, all the way from pennies a pound up to tens of dollars a pound,
Mm-hmm.
depending if Heinen's put in their dry aging case, you know?
Yeah.
So I want people to look at what they can do within their means
Absolutely.
to always
Absolutely,
go for the freshest ingredient they can get.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of getting a pre-cooked chicken breast frozen in a package, get the one that isn't cooked.
Mm-hmm.
The one that hasn't had various brines and preservatives and flavorings and things added to it. The one that's been minimally processed. There's a difference
Mm-hmm.
there, you know? And I think that's what a lot of us are missing in saying access to fresh food. And let's erase food deserts, because I think the slow food movement had an identity crisis where they're rich white people. you know, they are people that have the ability to nitpick and have this argument
Mm-hmm.
of, well, I want the finest quality as it relates to my health,
Mm-hmm.
right? It isn't necessarily about being a gourmand,
Right.
although that kind of goes side by side with it, you know, maybe not quite hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that relationship can build with time, and not everybody has to be a gourmand. These are really complex issues, you know? And I think if we kind of take a step back and say, I have a beautiful home and a beautiful family in Shaker Heights and a good school system. I've created a good job for myself. There's people 2 miles down the road from me in the Mount Pleasant and Kinsman neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
that some people are living in what was once a crack den. That's just down the road from me. My comparative access to fresh, wholesome food and their comparative access to fresh, wholesome food and what they know to be fresh and wholesome food is completely different.
Right.
You know?
But to your point, you can start with an inexpensive cut of meat and make it into something good. It doesn't have to.
100%.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's our ethos at Larder. Us, it doesn't necessarily matter what the ingredient is, because we kind of define things by proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, as opposed to chicken, pork, and shrimp.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things we look at when we create our food. Other people aren't necessarily taking that into account, you know? So I think it's just really important that we frame the access to fresh food, and we have to look at this as an inalienable right and understand that the people that live 2 miles down the road from me, regardless of what their socioeconomic status is, they should be able to get access to good, fresh food, just as I have access with the privileges I have being who I am.
Absolutely.
That is the common thing that we need to get.
Access and an understanding of how to prepare that fresh food.
Agreed.
Because I was at the food bank a week ago Friday, and they opened up like a supermarket there now, and they've got a cooking kitchen. They maybe had 1,000 eggplants. I don't know how many people
I mean, you know, you bring this up right now to any Cleveland area grocers who are listening to this, anybody from small places off the map like Nature's Oasis all the way up through Heinen's, you know, the local Giant. I implore any and all of you to have some sort of chef or culinary officer that is standing in your produce department with the sale produce item of the week doing a cooking demo.
That's a great idea. Dave's is doing that now.
I mean, people did.
Yeah.
And listen, I understand sampling, the pandemic, everything. Okay, so it isn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to give people a sample. And they don't have to take one if they don't want. Okay, so there's that too.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, that conversation is moot. But I challenge all these grocers, show people how to do it.
Yeah.
And listen, I've worked in the grocery industry. I worked corporate for Whole Foods. I understand margins in the grocery industry. I understand how you make your money and where your dollars need to come from. But the more engaged you are with people, and you walk into beautiful grocery stores and there's beautiful produce from all over the world and cuts of meat and cheeses from everywhere. And like shopping now in America, it's incredible. You can have anything you want from anywhere if you have the resources for it, you know? And just walking to the corner store, stuff that wasn't available 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I literally, on a regular basis from Heinen's, buy greenhouse grown strawberries when it's not strawberry season. Right now, they have them tagged that they're coming from an Ohio greenhouse. When they're not coming from the Ohio greenhouse, they come from one in Ontario that's just as local for me. It's on the, if I measure the miles going the other side of the lake, it happens to be an international border, yada, yada, all that stuff. But as far as food miles go, it's literally being shipped right across the lake, or it's maybe driven around, one of the two.
A couple hours,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's still a locally produced food for me in Cleveland, Ohio, for you in Cleveland, Ohio, you know.
Well, I will give it that the food bank did put in this kitchen, and they had all those eggplants. They did have somebody cooking eggplant and showing people, and have just kind of what you're saying a grocery store should do. They kind of started that in a way, kind of a closed loop there. So.
Yeah, and listen, if you're a grocery store, you write it off too, because the produce that got dinged or, you know, banged or bruised that, you know, somebody's not going to buy.
Yeah.
You know, this is why a lot of grocery stores have cut fruit departments, you know, where you can get all the convenience packaged stuff, because as we all shop, we bumble around, we destroy a display, we touch everything, you know, forget about the hands that even touched it before it got to the grocery store, you know? So there's a lot of loss there. So what they do is stuff they know won't sell. Maybe it got a little bruise on the corner. The side of the apple, you know, was pressed and it's a little flat instead of round. They take all that stuff. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it besides it's not the perfect aesthetic value to buy for the dollar that we've associated with it, right? So they then turn it into a value-added product that they cut off the bad part, they wash it, they peel it, they dice it, and now they've saved you, you know, minutes maybe in your kitchen, arguably. So it's still fresh food though.
Right.
So if that's what you have access to, that's okay.
Right.
There shouldn't be, me as a gastronome, I do not want to judge the food choices that other people make. I want to enable them to make the best choices for themselves, for the environment, and for us as a species and a planet. And there's only one way to do that, with holistic approaches in closed loop systems.
In minimally processed food. That apple you're talking about, it's just been cut. Nothing else has happened.
And listen, I will make an argument for the processing of foods. Okay? And I believe it's Michael Pollan that makes this argument. You can eat anything you want if you can make it yourself. Go ahead. You want to eat a cookie for breakfast, a slice of cake after, you know, your lunch, and you want to have ice cream for dessert, go ahead. Eat every single one of those things in one day if you can make them. All right? If you can't make them, or if they're maybe too laborious to make, only eat them when you do make them. All right? So if we kind of take this approach to food, we end up cooking, eating much differently than we otherwise would. And I think by kind of really, really focusing on that, we're going to be able to feed a lot of people. I know we have a lot of questions too on like the other side of the aisle. Like, if you want to hammer on this, you want to give people fresh access to fresh food, whether it's government subsidies or whatever it is. How are we going to do that? We can barely feed the people we have now. Well, we barely feed the people we have now because we completely misuse everything in the whole food system. One question here, Ken, just goes, we all this is so interconnected. You've asked why I've done so much in food.
Yeah.
And this is where we go. We just start tumbling.
So what made you decide to move from being on a farm to being a chef?
I was doing both at the same time.
Okay.
At the exact same time. And it made very much sense to me because think of a tomato. Picture it in your head. What's it? Kind of describe it to me really quick. Give me the size, the color, the shape.
I mean, it'd be red. I like Romas, Marzanos, Romas, those kind of things.
Okay.
It'd be about, I don't know.
A plum tomato, oval shape. Yeah. Yeah, nice and red. Maybe a little aromatic, maybe has a stem on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that tomato, and you said you like the Romas.
Yeah.
They were bred for a very specific purpose. And that is to have low moisture content, so that when you cut and cook them, and then cook and make a sauce, you're cooking it for less time.
Okay.
That is exactly what that tomato was specifically bred for.
And that was the first recipe on this that Kim and I did together, was from Roma tomatoes.
Yeah.
It easily takes less than 30 minutes.
Yeah, a breeder in Italy at some point in the past bred this variety specifically so that when they cooked the sauce, it would take less time.
That I didn't know.
We breed things for all different reasons, okay? Coincidentally, when they bred the San Marzano to do that, it was also bred for taste and flavor at that point too, because they weren't going to breed something crappy. We lose breeding for taste and flavor when we start shipping things across the world. Yeah. So let's loop back to the tomato. That's your definition of a tomato. I think I got some hothouse tomatoes for my girls the other day. They're this tricolor package. I was thinking like a little cherry tomato.
Yeah.
All right. That is for snacking. You don't want to cook that into sauce. You know how many of them you're going to need, how many you're going to have to pick. And,
right.
You don't want to slice that and put it on a sandwich. There's going to be so many. Heck, you don't even really want to cut cherry tomatoes at all.
Right.
You just want to snack on them or use them whole, right? So what this leads us to then, what is a tomato? If I think it's one thing, you think it's another thing. What is it? It is all of these things.
Heirloom tomatoes.
There's heirlooms tomatoes, but when we get into it, we can think of any given fruit or vegetable. Throughout history, since we've been breeding these plants, we've been capturing them from the wild and bringing them into fully terraformed areas where we've created these environments for them to thrive and succeed in. Okay? This happens over long periods of time. The tomatoes, apples, these are foods we've bred a lot of and have traveled the world. Apples come from Central Asia. Cornell, in their testing fields in upstate New York, they have over 10,000 varieties of apples, and they have a minimum of 2 trees of each.
That's incredible.
Tomatoes, we look at heirloom seed catalogs, hundreds to thousands and thousands of varieties of tomatoes, each one bred for a specific reason. Some were bred to withstand the rigors of transport, and if you walk into a grocery store now and buy a fresh field tomato, it's going to look like washed out pink color, mealy flesh to it, that was picked completely green, and then ripened with a natural occurring gas. It's what all plants use to ripen their fruits, called ethylene gas. It's forced into the area they're sitting in, and it ripens them. So you could buy that. Or you have an option nowadays of buying a hothouse grown tomato, so grown in a greenhouse, much different controls on there, probably closer to you because greenhouse infrastructure wants to be right near where its consumers are. We have some really, really cool greenhouses around the Great Lakes area because of this. That's going to be a little bit better quality. And then the real thing to do is just wait till it's ripe and growing in your backyard or at the farmer's market or, at the local grocery store, they bring in local stuff, all these different things of what a tomato is. So coming back to me, agriculture, being a chef, I started asking all these questions right away. Right off the bat, in culinary school farming, I was like, well, not all tomatoes are the same. They're all different. We grew 45 different varieties of tomatoes on the farm I managed.
Wow.
Any given season, we would have up to 30 different types of melons, and just pick a fruit or a vegetable. Okra, we would grow 3 or 4 different varieties. So we would literally do everything we can, and I was learning about cuisine and growing all this stuff at the farm. The owner of the farm, blessed memory, Paul Wigston, such a great guy. Paul, at the time I met him, was the head buyer for the culinary school I went to. And I was running the garden society on campus and running all the campus gardens, and I would bring everything from the gardens in to my kitchens, but not just like the tomatoes. I was bringing in the tomato leaves and stems, and we were like, let's they smell so good. Wait, can't we capture this somehow? Like, I know they say just eat the fruit, but I'm learning about all these different tomatoes. Why can't I use some of the leaves, just a little bit? Paul saw this and was like, hey, you want to come run my farm? We'll grow all this stuff. He had gone to Cornell. He was on their agricultural alumni board. Him and his family ran the Dutchess County Fair for years and years. Big agricultural family in the Hudson Valley, tracing their roots there back to the 1600s. Kind of one of the first settler waves. And kind of all this is happening to me at once. I'm in culinary college, I'm at school. I met this guy who was like, let's grow everything on the face of the planet. Let's taste each one. He was a chef's farmer, if that makes sense. Uh-huh. His focus was taste and flavor and the development of texture and what happened to my produce as it went through different stages. Let's eat something immature and unripe and see how it is. Maybe there's a different way of serving it, right? Papaya is a great example. We all think of it as the fruit.
Right.
But green papaya, immature ones, are used solely as a vegetable, much like we would use like shredded cabbage in a slaw or that sort of thing.
Okay.
So depending on when a fruit or a vegetable is ready, depends on how we can use it. It also depends on what the expression of its nutritional profile is going to be. Why chef? Why farmer? It was just so, to me, it made sense that I could not be one without the other. And foraging and botany in my college, that's all included in there. If I wanted to be able to eat and create and work with the things that I wanted to, this is the route I had to take.
So now we're going to get into, this is kind of the next question. So I kind of mentioned the reason we've eaten at Larder is because we love the food. So
well, thank you.
I be honest with you, I did not know until I bought your book what the hell Koji was. It's like, I don't know, his food just tastes good. I don't know how he makes it. I don't know where it comes from, except he gets good ingredients. So I guess for the audience here, explain. People can buy the book. I have the book here. Koji,
well, thank you.
But what is it, and how do you use it or incorporate it in what you do at Larder?
Sure. So Koji is the Japanese name for a species of mold. And a lot of people hear that word mold and they're like, we think of the leftovers in the back of the fridge we forgot about.
Yeah, that's when I first heard it too. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Or the black stuff in the bathroom, or under the siding, God forbid, that happens to you. But what most people don't realize is mold is just like there's a good and bad side to everything. There's great ones, all right? And anybody that's ever eaten traditional charcuteries, you gotten a piece of salami and it's got that white dusty stuff on it, or you've eaten brie cheese, or you've eaten coffee, chocolate, molds arguably used in bread production. There's a lot of things that we've eaten that we don't necessarily associate mold with that are used in the production of those foods to get them to the point where we actually consume them. So these molds have a long historical presence on this planet. And they evolved. Let's backtrack just a second. Molds are fungi. Fungi are different than plants. They're different than animals. They're their own separate kingdom of life. We believe Koji evolved and then was domesticated alongside of rice. Arguably one of the oldest domesticated foods on the planet. So it has a long history of being used.
We're talking tens of thousands of years.
I mean, we can project. We have archaeological evidence that puts Koji's refined use in pottery from 9,000 years ago in northern China. It was still a couple thousand years after that until that instance, that use, it was not being used to its full potential yet. It was very obvious they were using it in part of alcoholic fermentation, but not using it as the full driver yet. It would still be a bit of time before they realized the mold itself and growing on rice could be the full driver. They were still blending fruits and fruit sugar in at this point. So a couple thousand years we go, and then they start to write about and codify this Koji thing and everything. And what they did with it's remarkable, because if we can try to keep it really simple here for people to understand, when this mold grows on a starchy ingredient like rice or barley or even beans, it unlocks all the things that make that food up. So rice is made up of starch, okay? And it tastes starchy to us, right? Starches are made up of different combinations of small molecules of sugars. Koji, when it grows on the rice to feed itself, the way it digests, it breaks apart the starch molecule into all these small sugars. Now, we don't need more sugar in our diets nowadays. So the big thing we have to look at historically, why was that important? That allowed people to turn rice into alcohol. That's, we don't have to get into alcohol and that whole lineage and everything, but that was a very important thing for enjoyment, for sterilizing water, for medical use, for ceremonial use. Alcohol is important to humans all over the world. So that was a big driver for someone being like, let's use this mold. Coincidentally, over time, we found out that when it grows on protein-rich things like a bean, it breaks the complex protein down into the amino acids that make it up. So in a diet deficient of a well-balanced set of amino acids, introducing Koji onto the proteins, growing the mold on beans, turn the soybean from something that if you eat too many soybeans fresh, you can actually get sick. They have these compounds. There's many beans that can do this. Kidney beans, there's several different ones. So eating them fresh can actually make you sick and nutrient deficient. But when you grow mold on them and then let them sit and preserve them with salt, and you end up with something like a miso, now when you put that bit of miso on a bowl of rice with some pickled vegetables, you have a complete set of proteins. You also have a complete set of starches, and you have negligible amounts of fats. And Koji works on fat too to create aroma and taste mainly. There's other things it does, but when it comes down to it, it is a nutritional powerhouse. It is a flavor powerhouse. It is a texture changing powerhouse. It does everything, every measure of control a chef could want for controlling a variable in their food, from taste, aroma, texture, appearance, and so on. Koji can help you construct to a degree that's unparalleled, especially now in time with our understanding of these things and understanding how people used it before us. So kind of what we do at Larder with it is we cook with it. Because here's the thing about Koji, even though it came out of Asia, right? We believe it evolved somewhere in northern China. Eventually, it went all throughout China. It is used, go out to India, go up into Central Asia, up to Mongolia. They use these molds. You go down into the Indo-Pacific, and you're in the Philippines, Malaysia, even parts of Australia. They're using these molds. It's native to that part of the world. It's a tropical, subtropical mold. Eventually, the Japanese codified it, and they started writing eloquently about it and doing all these things, and they established the uses for it. And what we noticed in looking at all these things is Koji makes a food taste like the best version of itself. Kind of like salt helps us do. So, and my writing partner, one of my best friends, Richard Shee, who we wrote the book together, he has such an eloquent way of describing this. And what he says is, salt's a universal thing. No matter what you cook, from a cookie recipe up to soup to an entree, vegan food, no matter what, Salt is present at some point. It exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how we cook, and it's that way because we nutritionally need salt for various reasons, or salts, I should say, because there's many different types. We need them nutritionally. They taste good. They're fun to use in today's modern kitchen. There's many different types. You can collect them. They all taste different, use different uses. So we need salt. When you add salt to a tomato, you bite that tomato, and you put, everybody knows this, right? You put the salt on it, and you're like, all I did was put a few sprinkles of salt, and it's like waves on my tongue, and I still taste it 5 minutes later, and just tomato perfuming through my nose. It's like coming out my ears, People are like, salt, it's crazy. Koji does that same thing universally to food. Anything you apply it to, it will make it better, depending on how you apply it. All right? And we find evidence of this very directly in homes across the world, because I would be hard-pressed to find anybody from pretty much every socioeconomic status in America that didn't have at least one packet of soy sauce in their house.
Okay.
Or their car, or something like that. And when we're talking about it being in people's glove boxes, then we know, because you can't make soy sauce without Koji, that it is important, and it is everywhere, and everybody loves it. So now when we start to put our modern sensibilities and my and Allie's lens of food and how we cook and how we like to eat on that, that's how we use it at Larder. We use it the same ways that they do traditionally. We're just happen to cook different food, and we're in a different time and place, and I have access to different ingredients. So when I make charcuterie, which I used to use other molds for, one day I was like, hey, Koji, let's try this. And it worked faster and more delicious because Koji is much... As far as the culinary molds go, we have things that grow on cheeses, we have penicillin, and blue cheese, and it can be found in other foods too. Koji works, let's just say, 1,000,000 times faster, for some hyperbole here. Koji works 1,000,000 times faster than any of them in what they do and what they're used for their culinary purpose. And Koji can be adapted to do so many different things. Just like we kind of talked about the tomatoes, these different ones, everyone's got a different use. The big beefsteak tomato, the sauce tomato, the snacking tomato. Breeders of Koji in Japan, in China, in these places around the world, they've established as many different varieties of Koji as there are. We have tomatoes in this and so forth. We work with Higuchi Matsunosoke and Shoten. They are a Koji spore producer in Osaka, Japan. Okay? Koichi Higuchi is my friend. He's going to kill me if I get this wrong. I believe he's now 8th generation.
Wow.
His family company. He just took over from his father this past year, kind of the tail end of the pandemic. His father about to be about 80, roughly, I believe. And so Koichi's taking over. Koichi's my age. I'm 40. They produce his full catalog that I secretly have access to from time to time. There are thousands of different varieties of this mold, and each one acts in a different way. And I think let's loop it in here for people. Koji is powered by enzymes. Enzymes are what we use in our bodies to digest our food, but enzymes do all sorts of different things throughout our body. They're catalysts. They're responsible for creating reactions, whether it's the enzymes in your muscles, bringing oxygen to your cells and working with ATP and like the biochemistry of how you can actually move, or it is breaking down food in our gut and extracting nutrients from it. It's all powered by enzymes. And enzymes are types of proteins, so they can be destroyed. People get confused with other types of fermentation where they have starters. And they say, I can just add a starter to this. Ones that produce enzymes, they only produce them in finite numbers. It isn't like more going to be created, like with single cell bacteria and sauerkraut. They'll keep making love and making more bacteria and eating more.
Vinegar, sourdough bread.
Exactly. The molds are very, very, very different, So we have to work with them differently. They're bred differently. But what I'm trying to tell you is there's literally a mold for every purpose I could think of culinarily to create better food.
So everybody's got soy sauce, that's a given, but Koji beyond soy sauce, it's not a pervasive.
we're getting there. So I want you to, let's kind of shift our cultural lens for a second, because the majority of the world's population lives in Asia and has for many centuries now at this point. At one point it was Europe, but the Asians have the world beat as far as how many people are in one area. There are way more people throughout history and currently that are aware of Koji, whether they know it by that name or they know it by their name in their language or whatever it is in their culture, than people who don't have any reference for it or understand what it is or why it makes soy sauce or anything like that. So if we kind of shift our perspective, we have to ask, like, well, why is it taking the rest of us here so long to catch up to the rest of you? As is often the case. If we look at science and technology that came out of Asia, so much, and even South America that we're finding out now, that's a whole nother podcast. But they're really, really far, really, really advanced. And so we're just catching up in our understanding of using these molds in food production, understanding why they're used, what the benefits could be. You know, we're in the information age.
Right.
We wouldn't be having this discussion if it weren't for the internet and me having access to papers written in Japanese that I could have a computer program translate for me so I could read them in English. That's why we can do this now.
Okay.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fascinating.
And you use it in bread too, right?
I mean, we literally, when I say any culinary application, we can grow the mold on rice, on barley, on these beans, like I said, and then we can do various things and morph it into different expressions of these enzymes. We're really after the enzymes. Once we actually grow the mold, we kill the mold. And what is left is everything else, the enzymes, the things that activate. Okay. So we take the mold and then we cook it to a specific way into this porridge called amazake. Traditionally in Japan or China, or throw a dart at Asia, you would make something like amazake. They have various words for this in different cultures. If you then add yeast to it, or just leave it open air and wild yeast get in there, you will have sake. You will have soju. You will have any of these different various alcoholic beverages. Now that's great if you're making alcohol and vinegar, because vinegar is fermented alcohol, okay? When you are working with proteins, we kind of realize that this thing that was traditionally used for alcohol still contains the same enzymes that will make proteins taste better. In addition to all this stuff for free sugars and stuff. So when we said, oh, we're not going to put yeast in it, we're going to now make this liquid and we're going to use it as a medium to marinate proteins in, to cure various things in, change their textures. Really, what we're looking to do is just add the enzymes. The enzymes are what do all the flavor magic, the texture magic. Everything that seems alchemical or magical about Koji is all happening on a microscopic level with these things. That's why they're so important, you know? So, you know, we fostered in, we basically just kind of looked at things through a different lens. And we said, maybe you were using it for this way, but I can see using it this way too. Why wouldn't I want to mess with the protein content in my breads and build doughs of, you know, you mess with the protein content of flour in bread baking, and that's how you get breads with different textures and crumbs and feel to them and crust. So why wouldn't I want to supplant more enzymes where I could either create or destroy proteins and have a desired result that could be really cool and delicious? And with our rye bread recipe at Larder, the one that's in the book, it's like 20% rye by volume. The average, like, Jewish rye, what we think of as rye bread in America, you know, with the caraway seeds in there, that's like 2 to 3% rye by weight. There's almost no rye in there. Like, when you look at the back of a recipe and it says contains 2% or less of the following ingredients, the federal government, the FDA, USDA has said if it's under 2% or under of an ingredient, we don't actually have to say how much of it is in there, you know, for nutritional information, all this stuff. So when you think that a Jewish rye, a seeded rye in America is 2 to 3% rye flour, can we even call it rye bread? Like, these are ingredients that we don't even have to, like, label this ingredient technically according to the USDA standards at 2%. So, with adding the amazaki, this liquid extract of enzymes, in as part of the water into the hydration of a bread, we were able to use more rye flour, a more nutritionally dense grain than just plain wheat, and we source dark rye with the whole ground into it and everything. So it's a whole ground rye meal that we use. And we can still make a bread that's light and fluffy like a Wonder Loaf.
So, is that a healthier bread? Then I think everybody kind of understands now a loaf of Wonder Bread is not the healthiest bread to be eating.
A loaf of Wonder Bread, it is, it was called Wonder Bread because it was a wonder of modern science and food science engineering that created it. Like, that was why they called it Wonder Bread.
I didn't know that.
And I will tell you what, if I was alive when Wonder Bread premiered, being who I am now, right? Let's say I'm the same person, but I'm at that time period, I would have probably bought tons of Wonder Bread just to be like, what is it? How did you create this? I want to taste it, I want to see it. Okay, now how can I replicate that, right? That's kind of what drives me. So I would have been fully captivated by the premiere of that. At that time, though, too, it was a good thing that it was what it was. Nowadays, we realize, well, why do you have to mill flour and then actually bleach it and then remove all this stuff from it, and then you have to add all this stuff back into it in a purified form to now make it okay to... Whoa. Can't we just grind the flour? Can you go buy some rye berries or some wheat berries from the store? They're cheap. They're way cheaper than anything else. Put them in your blender and grind them. Just sift it out, take out the coarse stuff. You got some flour, It's that simple. And we can make great things with it. We were able, with Koji's enzymes, to kind of do things that have been possible for a long time in food. Some people have been working on them in various ways. I think we just kind of decided to do things our own way, and people enjoy that.
Like I said, it all tastes good.
It's interesting to think about that. Like, literally at this point, we create our cuisine on the molecular level. But I know that sounds like weird and complicated. I often think, like, when I think about that, I think of, like, pick your favorite sci-fi film where they're on the spaceship on the long journey and they're just like, well, in the simulator, we're taking this atom and that atom, we're putting it all together, and then the big flash of light and there's like dinner, or there's like a new weapon, or they're creating things that way. We do that at Larder, but I want people to keep in mind, like, we do this with our hands, we do this with like normal kitchen equipment, we do this, we just have an understanding of how these things work that we can apply them with traditional means. And this is why we often say that what we're doing at Larder is old stuff. It's stuff people have been doing forever, where we're just kind of putting modern sensibilities on it and our personal relatability behind it. That's kind of what, how we describe it.
It sounds great. And like I keep saying, it tastes great too. So travel. You've traveled. You get inspiration from your travel. I mean, have you been to Japan?
I have not.
Okay.
And this is something we have in the works because the Koji book's been very successful. I think we're about to be in 9 or 10 different languages.
Nice.
So a lot of people are using this ingredient around the world, and a lot of people are hungry for it outside of the traditional Asian cultures that embraced it. So that being said, by the end of spring of 2025, the Japanese translation of the book will be out with a publisher there. So when that comes, me and Rich hope to be over there for a little bit and doing some things. So that is one place I haven't been. Rich, my writing partner, he's a first-generation American. His parents emigrated from Taiwan. So kind of his sensibilities and views of... He has this really, really great cultural lens because he grew up like eating congee and pickled vegetables for breakfast. And now he loves breakfast cereal. He's like, give me all the Captain Crunch and all that. He's in his mid-40s and he's like... Anyways, he makes cookie dough miso now, This is why I love him. But, he was able to kind of bring in a grounding with how maybe some of the traditional uses, whether his family used it that way, he kind of had more of a reference point, right, for some of that indigenous use. And then everything else resulted from us, like, you know, we couldn't necessarily travel to Japan. And we haven't budget to travel to Japan to write this book, you know, that, but we could, there was many people that would jump on a Zoom call with us or respond to an email at a university, and a lot of people in academia happen to be bilingual, and a lot of people are bilingual in English. So there was a lot that, you know, think 21st century technology.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Rich and I met through Instagram.
Okay.
We were just watching each other's. We were both using like a Koji hashtag and you know, following each other's projects, and then somebody else was like, "You guys should meet," and we did, and that was that.
Nice.
You know. So we have the added benefit of being in the information age. We just have to, you know, tell people, seek proper information. Not to say that I'm the be all end all, but just like any information you're looking for. I said I met my writing partner on Instagram. Don't use that as a news feed, I guess I'm trying to say.
Got it. So what restaurants locally do you like to frequent when you're not?
So the big factor in this for me now is that I have kids, and sometimes it's just about feeding somebody quickly. We live in Shaker. We're not far from the Van Aken district. We spend some time there. Okay. You know, we've loved many different things that have been in and out of there over the years. So just kind of that whole area where we focus on. One of my daughter really loves the tacos from Cilantro Taqueria. They do a great job.
They do a great job.
They really do. It's fantastic. They know what they're doing. We've always loved it. So when they had opened up there, we were like, oh, this is sweet, you know? So, you know, casual bites. Recently, we've gotten takeout from Shuhai. We've gotten Superior Pho we've eaten recently. Korea House we've eaten recently.
Haven't tried them yet.
They're excellent. We due to get back to Cordelia. Like West Side Pizza is out of control. Everything from like City Slice and Il Rione to Sense. Oh my God, this cherry pizza. If you haven't been in there,
I've been in.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, here's the great thing about Cleveland. There are so many people doing so many delicious things. It's just like throw a dart, you know.
But people don't think of Cleveland that way. If you're outside of Cleveland,
and that's fine. They don't have to think of us that way. Let's enjoy it for ourselves. We always say this is the best kept secret. It's interesting you kind of bring that up too, because the 2050 UN climate report came out the last winter. It's basically a year old now. Our Department of the Interior, our State Department, is predicting 70 to 75 million American refugees to make their home in the Great Lakes region by 2050. That's a lot of people fleeing the earthquakes, the firelands, the droughts, the water restrictions, the floods, the hurricanes. Do we have much of any of that here?
Don't have any of it, yeah.
We don't really have any of it, and we happen to be the stewards of the largest freshwater resource in the world. There's a lot of people coming here, Ken. My advice to all Clevelanders, invest in Cleveland. Anybody along the lakeshore, Detroit, invest in Detroit. Sandusky, invest in Sandusky. Ashtabula, invest in Ashtabula. There's a lot of people coming here. If we as the Clevelanders can be the ones that dictate who should be coming in with outside money and buying up our resources that we're trying to improve and make better on, let us be the ones to make the decision for our region. Let's not let people who haven't lived here for a little bit or understand how our resources work, how our culture works. And granted, we're all Americans, this sort of thing. But if we're expecting this wave of people over the next 25 years, that gives us all plenty of time to start investing. You know, we should have, our lakeshore should be as stunning as any boardwalk and beach on an ocean or anything. We should have access up and down it. It shouldn't just be for people who have boats and can afford to have that.
They're starting to work on that.
And we are, but we really got to push before all these other people start coming in here. Last thing you're going to want is real estate interests from New York City, from California, big holdings.
They're already here.
They're already here, but just scrap buying up the whole lakeshore and turning it into stuff that the people who live here can't afford. We live here for a reason. It's very affordable. It's been this way for a long time. It's no secret that we have one of the most affordable housing markets in the country. People have known that for decades. So now's the time that Clevelanders really need to buckle down. You know, anybody in Ohio on the shoreline living along the lake, buckle down and invest in your community. Make decisions here to make your access to our natural resources better. Your life will improve. We'll have better wildlife, green spaces, fresher food.
All right, so one more question, then we'll get to your recipe. So
You
if you
got
had
it.
the attention of the world for 5 minutes, what would you say?
Stop fighting. That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Stop fighting. If we put all that time and energy into developing whatever it is we use to fight each other with into other things, whether it's leisure pursuit like dancing and art, or it's in feeding people, or it's exploring the universe, or whatever, let's do that instead. Just stop frickin' fighting. Everybody, just be kind to each other. We're not all going to agree, and that's okay. Just stop fighting.
So health, longevity, and kind of your philosophy on that as it relates to food, but also there are other factors that are healthy for you. There's points in history where leaders of the world who were fighting had a drink, had a meal, and then they went on like a walk.
Yeah.
And like solved so many problems because they weren't just on social media. They weren't, and they kind of just took some time out, and 30 minutes later they come back and like the world has changed.
Larder. So if we stopped fighting, we could kind of,
invest in
create closed loop systems for how we feed ourselves, how we transport ourselves. And we have the ability to use clean technology to create modes of transportation and feeding ourselves that won't be as detrimental to the environment as the things we do now. Yeah, and I think the big thing we have to understand is coming out of what food is in America, how we eat, how we enjoy it. It's a very, very interesting study in how food is across the world and throughout time. And the biggest thing we have to understand is the heralding of the atomic age brought about industrialization and processing as a good thing. Because we didn't necessarily know that if we strip and remove and then recombine and fortify it, we didn't necessarily know what was actually happening. We thought, the scientists and the people developing these things at that time and canned food, all these things, people literally thought their intentions were great.
Oh, yeah.
They wanted to feed people. They wanted to feed the world. They wanted to create fair access. And yes, people wanted to make money also, right? But things have kind of fallen out of whack. So the wow of the atomic age, now we kind of know all those things we developed, all the refinement, all that ultra processing. It is great for off-world exploring. It is great if we have to go to Mars, to the moon, that sort of thing. But as far as everyday diets for people here on this planet, it is not good for you.
Yeah.
And
so that leads us to our recipe.
Yes.
Our better food. So just a recipe that can be made in under 30 minutes, under $25 for a family of 4.
You got it. So I stopped by Park to Shop, which is a grocery store, a full-service grocery store. It is a Asian grocer just in this neighborhood here where we're recording today. Okay. So, and that's kind of why I did. I was like, you know what? This area, some people think this is a food desert. It's actually not, all these things. So let's see what we can do with roughly $25 at Park to Shop. So, and one of these things, on my way here, I stopped by an American persimmon tree and I picked you some persimmons. You said you've never had them before.
I've never had them, no.
These ones are not as sweet as the cultivated varieties. This is kind of like the wild American persimmon, although it is grown as a cultivar. It's not a truly wild food. So they don't get as sweet as some of the cultivated ones, but they've got this wonderful persimmon. Some people call it like honey fruit or custard fruit. People say it tastes like it's seasoned with hard spices already, like cinnamon, nutmeggy kind of flavor and aroma with like brown sugar and vanilla flavor and like a little bit, maybe some tartness in there depending on the stage. So these ones, the Americans, are a little astringent, so they'll dry your mouth out. But I picked those and then I was like, you know what? Let's go to the Asian market. So $1.99 a pound they had persimmons. We just need one for this recipe. We looked at a few different proteins, which people could go various ways. So I saw pigtails, a 2-pound package for $5.22. So there was also shrimp for $2.99 a pound. This is farm-raised Vietnamese shrimp, but it was shrimp with its head on. So definitely a whole food. And then there was a couple duck things that I saw. Duck wings were there, duck feet, some duck neck. All these are good kind of meaty parts that when we look at an approachable quick meal, there has to be enough protein to satiate. Protein doesn't have to be the full driver. So when we think about this, and we have so much more money for other ingredients. So if we think of something that we could nibble the protein off of, or we could eat for a longer period of time, which would make us think that we've eaten more protein than we haven't, something off the bone, like ribs or something where we're pulling them, or a cut like a tail, which is meaty, but may have some bones in it you're not used to eating. And if you like pork chops, you're going to love pigtail. It's muscle. It's got the skin on there, which is even better, and that gets crispy. We make pork rind. What we're going to do some of that. They had 5 spice powder, a box for $1.29. Tofu was also an option for protein at $1.89 for 1.5 pounds. So we're going to get a head of cabbage, some Napa cabbage. All right, Napa cabbage was $1.99, so it was roughly a pound. So for a head, roughly, it was about $2. So the thought was we would rub the persimmon on the pigtails.
Okay.
We would roast them on top of some cabbage. We would add a little bit of ginger, a little bit of the 5 spice powder, and then they had nice packages of mushrooms for like $1.25 each. And then we would save a little bit of cabbage while those pigtails are roasting with the cabbage and kind of steaming. And if we don't have to braise them, because if we kind of roast them and we eat them like a rib would be. So we're under 30 minutes for that in the oven. They're about an inch across.
Okay.
So it's really their thickness is really no thicker than a chicken breast would be, to cook.
Oh, okay.
So pigtails really quick. We're going to save some of the cabbage. We're going to shave a little bit of green radish in there. And we're going to make a salad with a little bit of ginger. And then to close it off, I got one last thing. We're going to have this all written up for you. And this will be under $25 and under 30 minutes to cook. We're going to get a few chestnuts. And we're going to roast them, and those will be for dessert.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
So yeah, I figured we could do an entree, a salad, and dessert for $25 under 30 minutes. I think it's totally possible.
Nice.
All basically with fresh food and even buying some spices. So
this will all be posted on the website. Eat Better For You.
Yeah.
So we'll have
Yeah.
a recipe.
And you can use these in the recipe, and that's kind of why. But you can also pick up a persimmon, and this time of year, fall, it's such a great fruit. And if I can say one more thing in closing, this is one thing I want your listeners to think about. There's a study that came out fairly recently, and pardon me because I can't cite it, but right now the average American only eats 12 different species. So let's see here: chicken, beef, pork, salmon, tuna. All right, that's our big proteins. Corn, soy, wheat. We are at 8. This is all people are eating. You need to eat as many different colors as you can. Yes. Steak is not different from burgers, is not different from chili. Just because you have beef 3 different ways. No. Eat a different freaking animal. Get a different nutritional profile. Don't constantly eat the same thing over and over. We need diversity of diet because we're omnivores. And if you're someone that decides you're not going to consume animal proteins, fine, there's ways you can do that. You still need to eat the widest variety of foods that you can eat. And you should not discount anything based on your taste preferences, because you can teach yourself to like something. Over time, you can disguise it in foods like we do with little kids. I know people have gotten into natto, the stringy mucousy beans from Japan. Literally, they started baking them into a chocolate cookie recipe. And eventually, your body, there's numerous studies done on this, your body starts to crave certain nutrient sets, and the bacteria in your gut are like, hey, I want this food, and your brain processes that as, oh, the natto had that nutrient. I got to eat it. I need it. And then you start to like it. So please, eat as many different foods as you've eaten before. How do you know where to start? Start picking all the foods you've never eaten before. Not just the foods like, oh, I ate mushrooms one time. So investigate. Start with the foods you've never had before. If you've never cooked and eaten an artichoke, or if you've only had canned artichokes, get a fresh artichoke and try it. Get it in your diet. Try a vegetable you haven't had before, a bitter green, maybe something somebody told you it was bitter and you're like, I don't know if I like bitter food. Well, if you've never actually eaten it, how do you know how bitter it is compared to what you can tolerate?
Well, and you can dress it. I mean,
you can dress it, you can cook it. There's all these different things. So eat dandelion greens, eat as many different colored foods as you can. And that's the advice. Eat things in moderation, you know? Mm-hmm. And if you can't, like Michael Pollan says, if you can't make it yourself, either source out the highest nutritionally sound quality of that food you can. So eat all the different food.
Okay. Couldn't agree more. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ken. Thanks for listening to me blab.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, my sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen, the leader in fresh fermented foods. Try Cleveland Kitchen's crunchy and delicious krauts, kimchi, pickles, packed with probiotics to support your gut health while elevating your meals from ordinary to extraordinary. Cleveland Kitchen, where taste meets wellness. Find it in the produce or deli section of your local grocery retailer or visit clevelandkitchen.com for more information. And please follow the show every week where you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Leave comments below or on my website, Eat Better Food Today.